Great to be with you in the early hours of New Year's Eve. The clock is ticking. We've got just under 22 hours to 2018. I'm with you right through till 5, as ever, on a Sunday morning, Saturday mornings too. And I'll be rejoining you, bonus balls, later on this evening from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Do definitely tune in then as well. I was telling you just before the news about Jonathan Freedon, the Guardian journalist, talking about a Labour MP who was shocked by so-called 1930s anti-Semitism. This was back in September of this year. I've done a little bit more digging into this during the news. A senior Labour MP has said he's shocked at some of the anti-Semitic tweets by party members that come before its disciplinary panel. John Cryer said some of what is written makes your hair stand up, adding, this stuff is redolent of the 1930s. He was speaking then at a fringe debate at the Labour conference in Brighton, and Labour says it condemns anti-Semitism in the strongest possible terms with tough new rules recently agreed by the party's ruling executive. That was back in September. Well, I want to get your view on this. What do we do more widely to convince people that anti-Semitism deserves never to rear its head again in our society? Just think of the lives that were lost fighting Nazism. Just think of what Nazis did to Jews and others in the 1930s and 1940s. Why would any person who's lucky enough to live in this great country of ours ever think that an anti-Semitic view is acceptable? I just don't understand it myself. I can't understand what it is that motivates people in hate. Yes, OK, we've heard some, haven't we, say on the show already this morning that the reason that people are anti-Semitic is that there are always those in society who want to blame others for how badly their lives are going. And when it gets to a really sinister and wider scale, then it becomes about movements trying to blame others. That's what happened in Hitler's Germany and elsewhere in Europe. But you just think these people can't be that bright, some of them. Can anyone be remotely intelligent and hold anti-Semitic or indeed anti-Muslim views? 0345 6060 973. Let's get your view. Abbas in Redbridge, will you listen? Abbas, morning.
Hi there. Good morning, Matt. First of all, I'd like to say I think you're very level-headed, very fair on the issues, to be honest, and I certainly would not criticise you for being biased at all. I think there is a danger, though. I think what's happening at the moment is that there is a bit of a witch hunt with the Labour Party, and it's very much because they have their very strong stance against Israel and what Israel does. And I'm not saying that there aren't people who are anti-Semitic within the Labour Party, and I believe that if they exist,
well, we know they exist. We know they have existed. We know that, don't we?
Well, to be anti-Semitic is illegal. We know that, right? And they should be reported to the police, and quite frankly, they should be arrested. I think there should be no bigotry allowed whatsoever, which incites hatred or violence towards the people. But I think what's actually happening is that the anti-Semitic, and first of all, your definition of anti-Semitic actually does cover Arabs as well, because they can be Semites.
But it doesn't in reality. Let's just be real about this. It hasn't come to mean that. It does not. It hasn't come to mean being anti-Arab. Anyone that we typically accuse of anti-Semitism, we mean it to be a hatred of Jews. So let's keep it simple.
I agree. The meaning has been somewhat just defined now. As negative comments.
It's very clear. Anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is very clear. It's hostility to, prejudice, or discrimination against Jews. The Semitic identity of Arabs and Jews is not here or there when we're talking about it. If people are anti-Arab, they're racist anti-Arabs. If people are anti-Muslim, they're effectively racist against Muslims, even though, yes, we all know that Islam is a religion, it's a faith. It's not a race. What is your main point? Your point is you think this is a witch hunt. So why are you reluctant to accept what's coming out of the mouth of someone who is Jewish, who is the founder of Momentum, which is an important group behind Jeremy Corbyn? If he says that there is anti-Semitism in the Labour Party and it comes in three forms, well, why aren't you prepared to take him at face value?
Well, because no, I have no problem with that. But what I'm trying to say is that he himself said that he doesn't think that there's any less anti-Semitism within the Conservative Party.
One might say to him, I don't know whether he has a Tory past, but one might say to him on that that his experience is much more likely to be heavily involved in the Labour Party than the Tory Party. And so that, thank you very much, is what we're going to be interested in.
No, I agree, Matt, but my point here is that if he himself then says that there's probably just as much anti-Semitism within the Conservative Party, then the question that we need to ask is that there's a bigotry that's somehow uniform within probably all of society, permeates probably not just politicians, but everywhere. And I totally agree that we should stem it out. Any type of hatred or bigotry against any people, whether it's Jewish or Muslims or Christians or anybody else, we should quash it, we should reject it, because nothing wholesome comes out of such a doctrine. It always ends in something very negative. But my point to you, Matt, is that I think often what happens, though, is that the overzealous people who wish to label everyone as anti-Semitic, that they go as far as to say that if you criticize Israel, you are being anti-Semitic.
Hang on.
If you criticize Zionism...
Who's calling everyone anti-Semitic? You're talking about overly zealous people. Who are these people who call everyone anti-Semitic?
Well, I've heard many times callers come onto your show and they've said that, people who have this strong stance against Israel, for example, and what Israel does to the Palestinians, they say that these are closet anti-Semites. They hate
No, I can't
Jews.
remember anyone saying that. Hang on, Abbas, slow down a sec. I can't remember anyone saying that on my show. What I can tell you is that although I absolutely agree that you can be anti-Israeli policy without being remotely anti-Semitic, I'm anti a lot of Israeli policy, and of course I'm not anti-Semitic. Although that is, of course, the case, there will also be those people who use Israel as an excuse to vent their anti-Semitism. Do you see the distinction?
I totally agree that there probably are people who hide behind and masquerade their comments, who actually hate Jews, and they do it in a way, in a stealth sort of way, hiding their true intention of the truth. But however, Matt, what I'm trying to say to you is that to be, for example, anti-Zionist, or for example to say I'm going to boycott products from Israel, that does not make you anti-Jewish. And if people go down that road...
But a lot of people they do use the words like Zio and things like that as a way of expressing their anti-Semitism. Michael Gove, I think, said at the Tory party conference in, was it October or September? He said that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. The idea that Jews have a right to the so-called Holy Land, if you don't feel that they have that historical right to it, I don't think that does make you anti-Semitic. But a lot of people who attack people as Zionists and call them words like Zio, that they are anti-Semites, Abbas.
No, but Matt, we've got to be very careful here. What we must
I think I'm being very careful.
No, we must be careful, because what we must not do is we must not always look at things glass half empty. Okay, we've got to give people the benefit of the doubt. We take
people as we find them.
Sorry?
We just take people as we find them.
No, but if somebody is anti-Zionist...
What do you understand by being anti-Zionist, Abbas?
Zionism is a political movement. It's not a religion.
Yeah, so what do you understand by Zionism?
Zionism has many, many forms. You have the very far extreme Zionists who basically want to see the end of all Arabs within that area.
The Zionism, basically, you talked about it as a political movement. It's a national movement of the Jewish people that supports the re-establishment of a Jewish homeland in the territory defined as the historic land of Israel, which roughly corresponds, I'm just looking at Wikipedia here, to Canaan, is that how you pronounce it? The Holy Land, or the region of Palestine. It goes on. Listen, the point is that people who are anti-Semitic quite often, I think, use anti-Zionism as an excuse to be anti-Semitic. Israel is where it is. Israel has a right to exist. What Israel does not have a right to do is to kick Palestinians out of their land. And the origins of Israel, of the Israeli state in the late 1940s, are hotly contested. Who was right, who was wrong? There was no doubt wrong and right done on both sides. And there are perfectly legitimate arguments that the way that the Israeli state was established was deeply problematic. That doesn't mean now that 70 years on, Israel does not have an inalienable right to exist, and that people who want to drive Israel, or drive the Jews, as they would sometimes say, into the sea, that is disgusting. It also doesn't mean that the Israeli state has the right to flout international law and regulations and move Palestinians out of their homes. Of course it doesn't, and I think the way that the Israeli state has treated Palestinians has been appalling at times. Which again doesn't mean that Hamas, or indeed Hezbollah, are not very wicked organisations. 0345